Hello and welcome to our Microsoft Meets Community event. My name is Neil McLoughlin. With me, I have Stefan Dingemanse, and together we are going to present to you some best practice around Windows Virtual Desktop. Stefan, how are you today?
Hey Neil, thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm all good. I'm very excited to be delivering this presentation with you.
Yeah, me too. So let's get started. Can you show us what we're going to talk about today, Neil?
Yep, sure. So we're going to speak to you about some community stuff that we've done. We're going to speak to you about Teams and OneDrive on WVD. We're going to do some multi-language setup configurations. We are going to tell you about monitoring your end user experience. We're also going to give you some best practices around optimizing your WVD image. We're going to teach you some stuff around how to size your platform appropriately and getting your VM sizing right for your workloads. And also we're going to give you some hints and advice around how to choose the correct storage for your VMs.
And all that in 45 minutes.
We're going to try. So introductions. So my name's Neil McLoughlin. I've been around IT for a number of years now. I currently work for a company called New Signature as a senior Citrix and WVD architect. I've probably been around in the sort of VDI world probably for about 10 years now. I spent the past 12 months focusing purely on Azure and WVD. I'm the co-founder of the WVD community group and also the co-founder of the UK WVD user group. I'm a CTA, I'm Citrix CTA, and also I'm a Microsoft MVP. You can contact me on Twitter at virtualmank and also at WVD community. And that's the same website as well, so virtualmank.co.uk and also wvdcommunity.com. And also there's my LinkedIn profile if you want to get in touch.
And my name is Stefan Dingemanse. I am 31 years old and I currently work as a senior platform engineer for a Dutch company called Firman ICT in the Netherlands. We are a cloud solution provider with its roots in the Microsoft and Citrix technology stack, which focuses on application and desktop delivery on the Azure platform. I worked for about 14 years in the IT, and most of my work and projects are focused on anything that is related to application and desktop delivery, Azure, DevOps, and the modern workplace. I am also the co-founder of the WVD community and the Dutch WVD user group. You can find me on Twitter or just contact me via email. Now let's start with some community news.
Yep, so there's a bit of history around the WVD community. So we were set up in April. The actual domain name was registered on the 12th of April. It all started off with a newsletter to gather all the weekly news because I saw that WVD was essentially changing so quick. I wanted to capture all that information and get out there for people to know about. So we've grown a lot over these past few months. We have 9 user groups worldwide. We've got over 1,000 Twitter followers. We've got over 15,000 page views on our website. We have over 500 Slack channel members. We've got over 1,000 podcast downloads with 12 episodes recorded. And we've got 25 newsletters published. So Stefan's going to tell you a bit more about the podcast and the Slack channels. And we will also introduce you to who we are as well. So the WVD community consists of myself, Stefan Dingemanse, who's here with us today, and also Patrick Kohler. So Stefan came on board very shortly after the community was founded, and Patrick Kohler joined us a few months ago. So Patrick sort of helps us to rebrand the website. He's added a WVD community.event site, which shows videos from previous conferences and videos about all other stuff as well about WVD. So if you want to look at any video content for WVD, head over to the wvdcommunity.event site and see what's on there.
Now some more about the WVD user groups. I think it all started with a tweet from Bas van Kaam mentioning we should set up user groups for WVD. And within 24 hours, there were already 6 user groups initiated and more in the next few weeks. The goal of these WVD user groups is to share WVD news locally and bring people together, and also give other people the possibility to present stuff they learned or know about WVD. So find out if there is a user group in your country and support them by joining. And as Neil just said, we also got a WVD community website. Here you can find all the weekly newsletters, listen to our podcast episodes, and find an overview of the user groups I just mentioned. You can subscribe to the weekly newsletter via this website. And there is also a nice button to become a Slack champion. More on that later. We also created the WVD community .events website. The goal of this website is to share videos from presentations and events all related to WVD and Azure. Via this website, you can also contribute and share your content. So if you're speaking at an event or just want to share your videos, you are more than welcome to upload it. At this moment, the content must be uploaded on YouTube. And after your request has been submitted, we will make the video available on our platform and promote it on our social networks. The only thing we want you to respect is, well, no advertisements and no promotions. We're simply searching for people who would like to share their knowledge and hands-on experience. We already mentioned our WVD community podcast. Neil and I started doing this podcast a few months ago. We decided to record a new episode every 2 weeks. And for every episode, we will invite a guest to chat about WVD. We didn't have any experience with doing stuff like this, but every episode we managed to get better and better. Once again, we are doing this for the community. We will invite people from the community to talk and share news and updates regarding WVD. We already had a few guests from Microsoft and also WVD partners like Nerdio, for example. And you can listen to our episodes on all major streaming services. I think the most popular is our Slack community. We set it up, I think 1 week after the initial WVD community website. If you want to talk about WVD, ask questions, or just help others, feel free to jump into our Slack channel. As you can see, we already got over 500 members. We got people from Microsoft like Tom Hickling. And we even got our very own request feature channel. So if you want to provide some feedback straight to the product team, you can just send it into the Slack channel. So feel free to join our Slack community. You can simply do that by scanning the QR code and sign up. So we will see you there.
So we've built this for the community. So if you have anything that you want to contribute, please get in touch. Whether you want to come on a podcast, whether you want to help out with the newsletter or have something you want to put in the newsletter, or whether you want to create a blog article, please just let us know. Search for WVD community and you'll find us. We're on Twitter, and obviously we shared the website details earlier on. So please, this is built for you. We want to help you out. So get in touch if you have something useful you want to tell everyone.
So let's get started with some WVD stuff. To get started, I would like to tell something more about the FSLogix string tool. When you are using FSLogix products for Office 365 and your profile containers, you will have quite large VAG files where the profile information is stored. These disks are mostly dynamic disks, so these will automatically expand when needed, which ensures each disk will only reserve the actual size of the content of the disk, which is good, but it will not shrink automatically. There is no built-in functionality to shrink those disks, and this is where the following script created by Jim Moyle comes in quite handy. Jim Moyle is an ex-FSLogix employee and now a global black belt for WVD at Microsoft. And this script is designed to work at enterprise scale to reduce the size of thousands of disks in the shortest time possible, and can be run from any machine in your environment. You can configure it, for example, to run as a scheduled task during maintenance hours. With the intention of reducing the storage load to the minimum, you can also configure the script to only shrink those disks where you will see the most benefit of shrinking it. So if you do not know this script, feel free to go to the GitHub of FSLogix and download a copy of it. So the next few slides will be around Microsoft Teams on WVD. Microsoft Teams on Windows Virtual Desktop supports chat and collaboration, and with the new media optimization, it now also supports the calling and meeting functionality. There are a few best practices on setting it up on your WVD session host. To get started, we'll always use the latest version available. And in this case, the latest version also includes a fix for the time zone issues within Teams. You can download the binaries from the documentation page. Before installing the VDI installation of Microsoft Teams, make sure to set up the isWVD environment registry key. This will make sure that the installation is using the system-wide installer, so Microsoft Teams will be installed in the program files folder. Also, there are two flags that must be set when installing Teams. We got the all user and all users parameter. The all user parameter is only used in VDI environments to specify the per machine installation, and the all users can be used in non-VDI and VDI environments. When you set this parameter, the Teams installer will appear in the add and remove programs. Also, regarding updating Teams, the system-wide installer won't update automatically. So you have to uninstall the current version and install the latest version on your golden image. And since the spring release is GA, also the audio video redirection from Teams is GA. And to set it up, you need to install the WebSocket service, which will where we will talk about in the next slide. So, yep. Neil.
Yep, so we did some testing around Teams. Results worked very, very well. So as you can see here, Teams uses the web RTC functionality to essentially run peer-to-peer. So if I'm connecting to a session over my local client and to a Teams call to another session, the communications will be directly between the two local clients rather than going through the WVD sort of backbone. And the hardware is also accessed directly. So the user experience is very, very good. So what we are showing you here is a WVD host, which is doing a Teams call. And we can see the local resources being used by that Teams call. So obviously that 38% CPU usage would have been on the WVD desktop, but instead it's on my local host. So all those GPU and CPU resources are essentially being offloaded onto your local host, which would enable you to create much higher host density and give a much better experience when using Teams for audio and video calls.
And as I just mentioned, I already had a lot of customers with issues regarding the Microsoft Teams client in combination with WVD, where it would only show the UTC time zone in the chat, meeting and calendars. And with the latest version of the desktop client, Microsoft has fixed this issue. And when you configure the RDP settings to redirect your time zone on your local client to your WVD session, you will see that within Teams, the correct time zone is being used for example, your calendar. You will see a screenshot right before I updated the Microsoft Teams client. And this is the one right after installing the latest version. As you can see, the Microsoft Meets Community event is now showing at the correct time. The next thing we would like to talk about is OneDrive on WVD, some best practices. By default, the OneDrive sync client installs per user, meaning OneDrive.exe gets installed for each user account on the user profile. With the use of the system-wide installer, it is now possible to share that executable from within the program files location. You can use the ADMX files supplied within that installation folder to configure your GPOs. Regarding the updates of OneDrive, there are 2 rings available. You will see the production ring. The production ring will get new features and improvements sooner. And the deferred ring, also known as the enterprise ring, will get the updates after they have been validated in the production ring. What I'm always doing is enabling the files on demand. So it's another best practice on a virtualized desktop. When you turn on files on demand, you will see all your files in the File Explorer, and you are still able to open them, make them available online, and navigate through them, even though they are not downloaded yet. So it will save some storage in your FSLogix profile, and that's always a good thing. Also, I would like to talk about the known folder move. With the known folder move, it's easier to migrate, or let's say to move the contents of the desktop documents and pictures folder and redirect it to your user's OneDrive folder. This lets your users continue working in the folders they are familiar with and access to their files from any device. So I recorded a little demo of what the end user experience is like. This is a user just signed into their WVD session. The first thing you will see is the silent configuration of their personal OneDrive. You will see a pop-up showing that is setup has been configured. And right after that, you will see another pop-up with the known folder move, where, as I just said, the desktop, the documents, and the pictures are all being redirected to that user's OneDrive folder, and it is available within OneDrive. So I still think this is one of the nice features about OneDrive, and I think you should, at least explore some possibilities with this. Another thing where I would like to talk about is languages in Windows 10. When dealing with multiple languages, you mostly got 2 options. You can create a dedicated host pool for each language, or create just one host pool where multiple languages are available. The reason why I wanted to share this is because now it's also possible to download the ISO files with a direct download link without the need of a volume license center or other locations with logins. You can find some more information on the URL. And on top of that, to make it even more easier, the same Jim Moyle has created a script to install all the required files for a language. So a language consists of the language files, but also some features on demand. To get this working, just grab a copy of Jim Moyle install language pack script, and you need the mapping file for those languages. When running the script, you can set the language which should be installed, and the scripts will take care of installing all the features and language features they need. At the end, you only need to get those languages available for your users. You can do this with a login script, for example. And in the end, your users will be able to choose their own language within their session. So it's a cool way of installing those languages. Optimizing images is an important step of preparing your images. There are multiple tools available for optimizing your image, which can be used with RDS, your virtual desktop environment, but also, for example, with Citrix. And today I wanted to highlight a new script which is created by Robert and Tim from Microsoft. And you probably know them from the VDI guys. This script will optimize your session host by disabling unnecessary services, removing AppX packages, and stopping scheduled tasks and maintenance tasks, which aren't needed for your virtual desktop session host. And I think the most important thing to mention here is to always check what kind of services you are disabling and what kind of applications you are removing. So, for example, this script will remove the sticky notes, the calculator, and Microsoft Paint from within the session host. So, if your users are going to need those, you have to edit the configurations file for this tool.
Another popular optimization tool out there is the Citrix optimizer. That's been around for a while. So using the Citrix optimizer gives you a nice GUI interface. You can easily modify what you want to optimize. You can create template files, and also every time a new version of Windows is released, that's generally updated as well. As you can tell out of the box, it will make around 155 optimization settings in your VM. So disable services, removes all the built-in applications, disabled scheduled tasks, that kind of stuff. So that's another alternative to look at if you want to optimize your VM easily.
Let's have a quick look on a not optimized and an optimized Windows 10 session host. As you can see, with an optimized session, there are less processes and threads running, and that's right after the image has been optimized.
So what does this mean for user experience? Obviously, the less processes and services that are running on an operating system, the better the experience is going to be. So we ran a quick test using Login VSI where we run two tests, one optimized, one non-optimized, and just looked at the stats, and we noticed there was a very clear difference in what we saw. So the dotted line is the non-optimized, the clear line is the optimized version. So there's, I'd say, probably 3 to 4 second difference in most cases in between open that document. So optimizing your VM or your master template will lead you to not only less resources being used, including high density, but it will give your users a better user experience as well. We also run the stats for login times and application opening times for, say, Word. Again, results speak for themselves. We the stats that we saw, probably about an average of 1 to 2 seconds login time difference. Obviously, you don't have all those applications involved when you're starting up, so logging in, so that makes the login process quicker. And again, we saw the same thing as we saw before, probably around a potentially 3 to 4 seconds difference in opening a Word document. So when it comes down to monitoring, I personally believe it's key to have a monitoring solution for your WVD environment. When your users are having a bad experience, you want to know why, right? So we're going to take you through some of the most popular options out there. So we're going to take you through the Microsoft Azure Monitor, we're going to take you through Sepago, Login VSI, and Control Up.
As Niels just said, one of these solutions is from Microsoft itself. There is a blog post written by some people from Microsoft where you can collect the diagnostics from within your host pool, send it to a log analytics workspace, and they also provided us with a workbook for creating your own dashboards. What you will see is you will get some details about your session performance, but also the host performance, disk performance, and other counters. I wanted to quickly show you how to set it up. If you want some more information, just visit the URL. But first you have to create a log analytics workspace. You will need to enable to send the diagnostics from within your WVD host pool to that log analytics workspace. And the final step is enabling the VM insights on your session host in your host pool. And right after that, you can just import the ready to use workbooks from Microsoft. And you will see a dashboard like this, where you can collect all the different counters and performance counters from within your WVD environment.
Another good option is if you want a very high level overview of what's going on with your host, you can use the default Microsoft Insights. So all you need is a log analytics workspace configuring for that and enable that on a per host basis. So that gives you a high level overview of what's going on around your CPU, what's going on with your IOPS, how much memory you've got free, what's your sort of VM, the throughput of your disks, that kind of thing. So it's very good for basic troubleshooting. But if you need to go into a bit more in depth as to what's actually going on inside the machine, then the other monitoring solutions that we've talked about today will be needed to be used to dig a bit further.
And another tool which can be used to gain some insights in your WVD deployment is the tool from Marshall Murrer, which is also the creator of the WVD admin tool. What it basically does is you will need to install an agent on each session host, and the agent will collect all different events and performance counters from within that session host and send it to a log analytics workspace. The reason why I wanted to show you this is since a few weeks it's also possible to get more insights about the profile load times and the GPO processing. You can deploy it via the Azure Marketplace. You will just have to install a agent onto your session host. During the installation, it will create a scheduled task on that session host, and you can connect that agent to a log analytics workspace. And as a final result, there is a nice overview on, for example, the logon data of those users. So as you can see in this screenshot, it's not only collecting the logon times, but it's also extracting the log files from within FSLogix. So you will see the group policy processing, the time it took to configure the drive mappings, but also the time it took to load the profile and show the desktop to that user. So if you are experiencing slow logons or logon performance issues, you can just try this solution, which is free for testing and community purposes. And so thanks, Marcel, for creating this tool.
You can also use Login VSI Enterprise to generate some workload if you want to. So Login VSI Enterprise enables us to pick a number of users that we can create ourselves and basically create our own workload or have some predefined workloads that they have for you. So you can configure your own, or you can just run basic Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, for example. So we use this for our testing for this presentation, where we had a virtual appliance, a launcher, and the actual workload, which is the WVD server. So we didn't connect directly through WVD. We connected straight through RDP onto the VM because we're just stress testing the CPU and memory and disk and stuff. So this is a example workload that we did. We're using Control Up just to see the capabilities of the product. So here what you can see, we have a WVD host, which is running Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. We've got 5 users logged onto it at this stage. We're running around 74% CPU. It tells us the overall stats, so we can see what IOPS have been done. We can see what the process is doing, just to give us that good high-level overview of what's going on in that operating system. So here's what you can see a bit further later on in the test. So this is with 8 users logged on. So this is within the recommended configuration. So we can see we've got 100% CPU. The machine stress level is high. And the memory utilization is okay. Our disk IOPS are okay, but it's the CPU, which is a limiting factor here, which we'll discuss a bit later when we go into our sizing recommendations. This is also a very useful feature in Control Up. So you can have a look at what's going on a per session basis. So it picks up the individual session IDs, so we can have a look at the CPU usage. We can see how much RAM that session is using, how much IOPS that session is using, for example. And we can also go in and have a look if we want to dig a bit deeper to see what the process is running and that kind of information. So again, for a very high-level detailed overview, I highly recommend this product if you want to know what's going on with your own workloads. So we can discuss sizing now. So for me, sizing is one of the most important decisions that you'll make within your WVD environment. Within Azure, there are literally hundreds of different configurations of VMs. So if you get the sizing wrong, it's either going to cost you a lot of money or it's going to upset your users because their experience isn't going to be great. So when we talk about sizing, there's a lot of different factors we can take into consideration. So we've got our VM type, the CPU size, we've got our memory, our disk performance, network. There's lots of different considerations to take into. So over the next few slides, we'll try and help you with some of those decisions. So VM types, we have our general purpose VMs, which most commonly are our D series VMs. We have our compute optimized VMs, which are S series, and we have our GPU VMs, which you can either pick a AMD or NVIDIA GPU. Most commonly out there, I see D series in the wild. We'll talk about D series a bit further later in the slides. So where do you start with your sizing recommendations? So here are the macro recommendations. So we have different workloads which consist of like power, heavy, medium, and light. Most environments I see fall into the power/heavy category. Most more leaning towards the power category. So the recommendation there is 1 vCPU per user or 2 vCPU for the heavy users. We ran some standard tests using the recommended workload. So this was basic Office applications. So as you can see, using the recommendations, we're hitting around 80 to 100% CPU. And so IOPS is good, memory is good, but it's CPU, which is the limiting factor here. We ran the same test on a D4S version 3 with 8 users. Results are pretty much the same. And we run the same test on a D8S version 3. So that's with 16 users. Again, we're hitting around 80% CPU average for a basic Office workload. We also ran the test on a F-series VM. So that's the VM which has got a bit of a faster CPU in it. So as you can see, whereas previously on a D-series, we're hitting between 80 to 100% CPU. We've now dropped down probably to around average 70% CPU. So why would you choose an F-series over a D-series? So again, we ran the same workload. We noticed straight away, looking at the statistics, that essentially when you run a F-series, your response time is a lot quicker. Your users will definitely notice it. So we're seeing probably anywhere between 3 and 5 second difference between opening a Word document. Obviously, more intensive tasks, you'll see an even bigger difference. Costings. So if you go with a D8, that's going to cost you around $610 per month. If you go to an F-series, F8, that has the same virtual CPUs, but only 16 gigs of RAM, and that's going to cost you $578. So as we saw from our own tests of our own workload, the limiting factor is the CPU. So if you can get away with using the F-series with the lower memory, then I'd highly recommend to do that. But if you need that increased memory, then you need to go up to an F16. That's going to cost you double. So that's quite an interesting factor now. So obviously these tests that we did, they're based on a very predictable workload. Just one Office application open at one time and then closing, for example. In the real world, that's not what it looks like. This, for example, is a D16 version 4, which has got 16 CPU and 64 gigs of RAM. As we can see, we're using up 72% CPU and half of the memory. So always analyze your own workload just to see what's going on, because everyone's application is different, right?
So, Neil, since this presentation is all about the WVD community, what did they say about their experience with sizing their WVD deployment?
Yep, so they said pretty much what we found during our own testing. They'd basically started off with the Microsoft recommendations, and they suffered performance issues. So in most cases, they had to up the size of their VM to give the users a good experience. So I think that the figures tell pretty much the story there. So 65% of the respondents had issues with the standard recommendations. Also the same survey was put out on our WVD community Twitter page, and 71% of the respondents said had performance issues. So again, I'm going to say it, please, please, please analyze your sizing, look at your stats, and to do that to make sure that you give your users a good user experience. A few key takeaways that we've done from this testing. So this was a very predictable workload, as in one application at one time. Your real workload is very, very different. So monitor it as much as you can, especially when you're implementing the environment. But even after implementing it, you still need to keep an eye on the stats of those VMs to make sure that your users are getting the best experience, and also that you're not spending too much money on sort of overspec VMs potentially. Good tip for you. So if you want a GPU in your environment, we've got the new NVV4 series. So they've got an AMD GPU. You can get these in much lower specs compared to the NVIDIAs. So you can have up to, well, the lowest one is 4 CPU and 14 gigs of RAM. And that's a similar cost to a D series. So check out if you need a GPU capability. We've also got the new D4 series. They come with a much faster CPU. So if you're building a new environment, definitely go with those because it won't cost you anything extra. But also be aware that you can't migrate from a D3 to a D4. You have to recreate the VM because it doesn't have a temporary disk. Another key decision is your storage of your hard disks on your VMs. So by default, when you create a managed disk for each VM, you can have a premium SSD or a standard SSD, or you can have a standard HDD if you really want it, but I really wouldn't advise it. So I would always recommend a premium SSD because it gives you IOPS burst capability. On a standard SSD, you only get a maximum of 500 IOPS. So always go with a premium SSD if your budget allows. These are the costings. So premium SSD is going to cost you pretty much double. But as I said, you get that burst capability, and the bigger your disk is, the more IOPS you'll get. But if your workload would run happily with 500 IOPS, go with a standard SSD. So some key takeaways. Don't be scared to get involved with the community. We don't bite. We're all very nice people. Support your local user groups if you can. I'm sure they'll be very happy to have you. Optimize OneDrive and Teams for WVD. Again, your users will like you for it, and you get a much better experience, and higher density equals lower cost as well. Know your workload and your application landscape. Size your environment based on your own workload, not the recommendations that are given by default, because each environment is different. Use a monitoring solution if you can. It won't cost you much, especially if you go with the Microsoft ones.
And this was our presentation. We hope you enjoyed this as much as we did, and stay tuned for some more in-depth WVD presentations today. We would like to invite you to participate in our WVD community. If you want to contribute to the WVD community, there are multiple ways. You can start with visiting the WVDcommunity.com website. From there, you can join our WVD Slack channel, and there is also an overview of the WVD user groups. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter or listen to our WVD community podcasts. We would like to thank you all for your time and for attending this great Microsoft Meets community event.
Yep, and if you do have any questions about the topics that we discussed today, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the presentations. Goodbye.